this meeting of the Winthrop School Board to order. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, that was not nice.
No. All right. Roll call is really easy today. We've got two members who are out sick today, Ivy and Catherine. Jim is potentially joining us on the Zoom, not yet, from his vacation. And then so we have Alicia, Tim, and myself here. We are not having a full regular meeting for those of you who are joining us from Zoom, if there is anybody. So there's no public comment section, and we're really using today as a workshop to talk about the strategic plan, the draft that we have, along with district data presentation from Megan, and a chance to ask questions of the other administrators who are here if we have any. I expect that Ivy at least will probably be joining us on the Zoom. If she's not, she is. Okay, great. And possibly Catherine, although I think she was looking more for the recording at this point. So without further ado, Megan, you're in.
Perfect. So we're going to start off by talking a little bit about our school and district data. And I think is that on?
If it's not on, I'm not sure.
I should have done this before. Hello?
Just talk loud.
Hello? Yeah, I can talk. I had a teacher voice. So part of this was put together per request from the board and added to the agenda. But also, this type of a presentation is something that I'll talk about a little bit at the end, but it's something that we would like to do annually. However, this time of the year isn't the most functional time of the year because most of our reports are due at the end of this month. So a lot of the data we're going to be discussing today, although it's going to be current, it's our current public data that's been certified by the state. So it feels a little hard to be looking at 2022 data when we're in 2023, but some of those pieces haven't gone through the channels that they need to before they're public knowledge too. So I just want to kind of preface this and then let the board know that we'll do something very similar as we approach most likely early December or end of November once our testing data is out for the fall. And we'll put together all of the similar types of data to present to you folks at that point as well.
As far as the other data that we were requesting, is that stuff that would be more current in, say, July or August? Or do we need to wait for December for that?
So we did add in some behavior. One of the things that we spoke about was, or that was mentioned by the board, was behavior and bullying, and we do have information that was certified in April. Perfect. So we are presenting some behavior information from April 15th, and we also have, as of April 15th, what our bullying totals were as well. And that is part of the presentation.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. So the general data that we're going to go over today is going to be some demographic data. So what does our district look like on paper? Student outcome data, which is going to include testing, kind of postgraduate plans, and graduation rate. We're going to look at student behavior data, which is attendance, behavior, and bullying. And then we have a faculty feedback survey that we gave this spring to all of our ed techs and teachers to kind of get a gauge on where we are in their perspective as a district and as buildings. So we're going to start off with our district demographic data. And so here you can see there's our enrollment totals. This is taken from the data dashboard. So all of this is all public. It is broken down a little differently. So the orange line is our district. So you can see that's kind of our district totals. It's nice to see the numbers in the table as well. They do break it into pre-K and K because those numbers often can fluctuate. And then 1st through 5th, 6th through 8th, and 9th through 12th. So we do, from this data, it's pretty apparent to see 2020, that fall, because this is October certification data, was a huge dip for all of our schools. We do see the middle school is a little bit higher than it was in 2019, but especially pre-K and K where parents can elect to have students come in at a certain age, our enrollment numbers were really down for that program. They have increased a little bit in certain buildings. It's easy kind of to see right now that the middle school is higher higher than it was pre-COVID, our pre-COVID data. The high school's down a little bit, and the grade school is down as well. One reason for that is there's a very, very large 8th grade class right now. They're the upcoming 9th, so next year we're gonna see a swing of 15 students automatically at the high school, so that's almost a whole classroom worth of kids that have traveled the last 3 years across the middle school. So, you know, a lot of the data we're gonna discuss today, this actually is very nice, because it's gonna tie nicely into some of our goals for the strategic plan, because these are pieces we look at. So as we're talking about communication, relationships, and putting on a public relations goal in our strategic plan, some of this information is part of what guided those goals. This is just from the ESSA dashboard, so this is our total student enrollment. This is May of 2022. So last spring, not a pretty even split of males, females. Generally, we have a large white population, not a lot of ethnic and racial diversity. If we take a look at our additional student groups, we can see that last May, we were a little bit above 31% for our economically disadvantaged, which we've talked about a lot at the board level. And if you look in the lower right corner, we can see that our special ed population is 13.2%. And it's important to note that this has gone up a lot over the last 3 years. So we are seeing a pretty significant increase in our students with disabilities. However, that is still well below the state, which is between 17 and 20% over the last couple of years. So although our special ed numbers are increasing compared to the state average, which they don't have on here, we are still pretty well below that, 13 versus 17 to 20.
On that last graph, it says students in foster care, that's a large.
So if we have less than 10 students as a district,
Okay.
they don't add a percentage there because it's too much of an identifying factor.
And that's what's going on there.
Yeah, but it says right here at the bottom, and I know it's hard for you folks to see, an asterisk or gray bar indicates that data has been suppressed to protect student privacy.
Okay, good, because I was also looking at that going, that's really big.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, it's suppressed data.
Okay, great.
So our teacher workforce, again, this is May of last year. We had 56 teachers, 55 of those were normal classroom teachers, and we have one Title I teacher here at the grade school, so they're funded a little bit differently. And then we have some information on the degrees earned for our teacher population. So bachelor's degree only, 50, a little bit more than half. And from there, we go into some more advanced studies. So those that are working on their master's but not there yet is a 15 plus. 8% we were at master's degree being 24.9%. And then continuing on from there to a plus 30 or plus 15 is a little bit less. Something that had again come up previously is the lines here. And this is again, right, for public knowledge, this is on our ESSA dashboard. Our state averages are these lines. So as far as the percentage of that have a bachelor's is higher than the state average. And we kind of see that exact same piece there, kind of missing from this master's degree piece here. So I think that those two things are in direct proportion as far as what it looks like here in Winthrop.
Megan, can we get printouts of these dashboard things that are not currently in our packet?
Yeah, so the ones in your packet are the ones that tie very closely to the strategic plan.
Okay.
I'm happy to share this with the board. I also think per the board's request, we could make these available online.
Perfect.
And I'd be happy at some point to show you all how to access this dashboard. It's, again, it's public, everyone can. I took screenshots.
Okay,
So,
great, thank you.
for these items, not all of them, but some of these. This one I did not. So this is our per pupil spending, and I think that this is an important piece to note as we're thinking district-wide. We've always been below the state average, so pre-COVID, once the state of Maine kind of came through on their good as far as covering a larger percentage of public education, right, it was 55%, I believe, right? So we can see when that actually happened, when Governor Mills did that, and she bumped it a little bit, and then she made it to where the promise had been made. We also increased our budget, right? We had those subsidies, we were able to do so, but we still are not where the state average is. So if we're thinking about other schools in the area, this isn't just a local look, this is state data. So achievement in reading and achievement in math, this exact information is in our strategic plan packet because that's part of, again, the data we're using to inform our next steps. So just a quick summary of these two graphs. I want to point out to the board, and anyone else watching on Zoom or at the later point, these graphs do look very different, but I want to point out that the groups that are tested are also different. So if you look at the bottom, from 17 to 18, we only did NOEA testing for our K to 8th grade learners. Same with in 18-19. On the other side of COVID, we determined it was important to be gathering data on our high school students as well. These are kids that we've been following from 8th grade anyways, right? So at this point, it's imperative that we're keeping an eye on them as they travel through high school. So we do see some shifts here that I'm happy to point out as well, but I do want to say that sample group is different between these 2 years. So one thing that we notice in reading is that the amount of students above the 60th percentile, so that would be anything that's green here, okay, has decreased. So 50th percentile means out of 100, you're right in the middle, so 60th percentile would be over that middle score. NOEA uses the 50th percentile for RIT score, but a lot of achievement studies say the 60th percentile is more indicative of achievement moving forward. So we did see that there was a little bit of a dip. Prior to COVID, we were around 58%, hitting the 60th percentile or more, and now we're less than half of kids above the 60th percentile at around 43. The state has shifted to also including growth as part of their measurements, so I wanted to make sure that the board was aware of that, and also seeing that here. So if we look at growth data, we can see that we have kind of an overall, the growth is shown as the darker color of each of the corresponding colors. So those are students that are in that percentile that also met their growth target. And we see that those amounts are smaller than pre-COVID a little bit too. So some of those growth pieces aren't where they were, so we see that COVID dip. But I do want to point out, and I know it's written right there on the board too, that is back on the rise. So in 2018, 44% of our students had made their growth goal. Right after COVID, it was 36%. Last year, it was 42%. Looking at our upcoming spring data, it would be wonderful if we were at 44 or above, so that at least the students meeting their growth goals is going to be comparable to growth 4. And again, the achievement piece is a little challenging because we're looking at different grade spans. I hope that as the state of Maine adopts, NOEA as their benchmark and starts looking at goals set through that modality, that we're able to get more longitudinal data to back that up. Math follows very similar suit. Specifically on this graph, and you see it in reading as well, our 81st to the 100th usually contains our GT kids. So for me, when I look at this graph, the biggest change to me is that blue group, right? So part of our strategic plan is to do an audit of our GT programming and see, dig into this a little bit more. So as we're looking here, it's not in the summary, but it's something that you'll hear a parallel or read a parallel to in our strategic plan later this evening. So similarly, we saw a little bit of a dip in our 60th percentile learners. It went from 52, which was lower prior to 38. But our growth is kind of working its way back up. It was 48, 51, 30 right after COVID, and now 35. That's not huge. Traditionally, Winthrop has struggled more in math. And so you're also going to see that as part of our strategic plan is we're really looking at building intervention pieces at our middle level and our grade school level. So these are all considerations, and this is the data to back those up. Our next piece, we're going to start talking about our student outcome data, and Lexi's actually going to talk a little bit about this piece for you.
Thank you, Megan. So this, keeping in mind again, this is from the school year 21-22. So we had 73.6% of our high school graduates going on to post-secondary education, and that was either here in the state or out of the state. And at the time, we had they're really concurrent enrollment classes, so classes that we offer at the high school that students are also receiving college credit for. We were offering 4 math courses, 4 ELA courses, and 2 social studies courses. And then I think the really impressive part of this data is the students who were enrolled and then earned AP credit. So if you look at math, we had 10 students taking an AP course, 70% earned a 3 or higher, which means they were able to receive college credit in most colleges that they were heading off to. 21 took the English, which would be Lit or Lang, 81%, and 100% in English Lit got a 3 or scored a 3 or higher. Science, we had 16 students with 25% scoring 3 or higher, and then in social studies, we had 71% scoring 3 or higher, and 100% in the AP Psych class.
Wow.
So we will be able to provide this information again. We can't give you this information for this year because it hasn't been finalized.
Are there any students who are or were actively taking courses through a local college while they were also in school, not AP, but?
Yes.
Okay.
So the concurrent enrollment does not necessarily mean they're all AP classes.
Okay.
Some of them are and some of them aren't. So they can take a class, they can also take a class, if we don't offer the class itself, then they can also take the class at the college level.
Okay, I know that when I was in high school, we were sending kids to Bates to take classes.
Right, yeah, and right now, we're working primarily on allowing that to happen with juniors and seniors. I believe that is my only slide that I'm presenting in this portion, so I'm going to hand it over to Jay.
Hello, everyone.
Okay.
So this is the student outcome or graduation rate for the class of 2022. Obviously, it precedes me, but it shows the 4, the 5, and the 6-year graduation rate from the class of 2022. At 81.8% for the 4-year rate, and it has the male and female breakdown. Now, the interesting thing I've always found about the graduation rate of the cohorts is the state and the media and folks really look at the 4-year number. The 4-year number is what everybody really looks at. I always focused on, the 4, the 5, and the 6, and I encourage Meg, when she put this together, to look at the 5 and the 6. After 4 years of high school, you're considered a dropout. It's a terrible statistic. It's a personal opinion of mine. It's a thing that I really don't like looking at that, because some kids just need more time and support. Some kids are on a different path. Some kids, need that extra year or 2 of high school. Let's say at Winthrop, they're a special education student, and they just need that time and support to be able to succeed in their programming. So where most folks focus just on the 4-year cohort, which is really important, and that's what really a lot of the state funding comes from. I always looked at the 5 and the 6-year rate, which if you look at it, 91.7% is pretty impressive. And a lot of communities that are larger than Winthrop or have some more struggles with socioeconomics, that 5 and 6-year rate is something that they look at as well. Places like Portland, where they have a large ELL population, for example, is where they'll look a lot at the 5 and 6-year rate, especially when you have kids that are coming from other places and English is not their first language. They need that extra time. So we're not very big, so when we talk about a couple of kids in a graduating class of, let's say, like this year, 53, that can move your percentage points. If you have a kid that goes a different pathway, whether it be to Job Corps or adult education, a couple of kids can move your percentage points one way or another pretty quickly in a small school like Winthrop.
In our packets, we have the graduation rate with the 4-year cohort.
Yep.
Do you have that information? Yeah. Can you tell me why there's no data for the Winthrop Public Schools for 21?
So I looked that up quickly because I saw that on the graph. Again, you can DOE main graduation rates. So I looked that up, and I don't know if Megan has any more insight. The only thing I can think of is I saw that there were 54 kids in that cohort, in that senior class, but it looks like it either wasn't reported or wasn't reported accurately, so the actual graduation rate, there's a star there. And when I looked through the high schools during the 2021, which was a COVID year, there are a number of them. And I think it might have, I don't know if it has anything to do with the different diplomas, the different pathways, the state diploma, and a lot of those, maybe the state really kind of
There was.
Gave schools a pass that year.
Yeah, Winthrop's not the only one to not have data reported out that year, and there's no information. And because we don't have the administrator available at this time, I really am not comfortable commenting on why it wasn't reported.
I'm not, so,
Or it wasn't, or it's not reported out by the state. They didn't give information as to why. It was an asterisk and.
I guess, that water under the bridge, there's nothing we can do about that, but do we have that information locally to be able to look at what that graduation,
For the 4-year cohort, I can look and see if we can get that from
If you would.
Historical Power School. I can
Yeah.
see, I'm not sure, I don't know how all of these pieces are reported out to the state, so.
And the state weighs in on some of them because, like, right now, we're preparing to roll Power School over and report our data to the state for the class of 2023. And we won't have data for the class of 2023's graduation rate, the state won't, until typically mid-October. That's when we get our report back and our percentages.
even if we could have just the raw data.
We could probably get something rough.
understanding that
I'm
it
sure we
might be
could find,
different.
try to find something.
Well, we have to look at, yes, I think we can look into that. We do have some staff that was there as well, but transferred out, depending on what transfer information was given,
Yep.
can mean a couple different things.
Okay,
So I will dig into that a little bit further.
Thank
No
you.
worries.
So when you look at this particular slide, from 2018 to 2022, you see the state in blue, and you see relatively strong numbers pre-COVID, and then, your COVID year, and I'm not sure what Winthrop did, if did they alter any diploma, any credit stuff? A lot of schools did?
Not as far as
2020?
credits that students had to
No,
earn.
okay.
Just community service.
Just community service, okay. And then, things start to dip a little bit, and blame that on a lot of things, but, I think you're gonna see a lot of those numbers, dipping in a similar fashion when you look at, schools that are 2020 and beyond. I know the school that I came from in 2020, we reduced our credits because of the shutdown of schools from 24 to 18. Some schools went with the sort of the state minimum, which was even lower. The following year, we upped it again. We upped it to like 22, and then we slowly went back to 24, which was the requirement before COVID. There's a lot of anecdotal stuff that I could say as to the graduation rates kind of tailing off there for all the high schools in the state, or probably across the nation, during the pandemic and post-pandemic. So I'm curious to see what our numbers look like for the class of 2023 cohort. Me just having them for 1 year, and, pushing and pulling some of the kids through this year to get them across the finish line. And some of those kids would be, in the 5 and 6 year cohort, because there was at least a handful of them, or less than a handful of them, that were 5th year seniors, that made it in that 5th year cohort, and needed that extra time and support.
do any of the members of the board have questions?
Ivy asked if you guys knew how many graduated the year of 21. I said that you guys are gonna look into it.
Thank you.
Yeah, all I got was a cohort number from the state of being 54. So that number likely is the number of kids that entered Winthrop High School as 9th graders.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
This isn't me, is
You
it?
don't do any
This is Debbie. It's not nice to point at me.
Gotta get the mic working for me.
No, you got a voice. I know you got it.
So, hello, I'm going to be talking a little bit about attendance, the chronic absenteeism and truancy. So basically, chronic absenteeism is 10% of the school days that students miss. And we have to report out the attendance quarterly. It's typically October, January, April, and July, I believe, quarterly. And we do have to record for each day of instruction that the students, each student is here. Now, chronic absenteeism and truancy are two different things. These are conversations I know I've had with several of our families. Chronic absenteeism takes into account excused absences unexcused absences, as well as suspensions. So it's any day that they are not in school. In truancy, you will see, with truancy, there are 6 different truancy thresholds, which determines the law with truancy. I think it's important to note that in 2019, there was a change with the compulsory attendance and truancy law, that it's now 6-year-olds. Any child that has reached their 6th birthday now must be in attendance in school up until their 17th birthday. In addition, a 5-year-old who is enrolled in school also must attend, and then the laws then kick in with truancy and chronic absenteeism, unless the family decides to pull the 5-year-old out of school, which they have the right to do that. Oh, don't leave me in charge of technology. We're good. Great. And with this particular slide with attendance, I think overall it really does show, since COVID, there has been a rise in chronic absenteeism, which this is statewide. There is a lot of talk just in Maine, and I know several other states, that there is a great increase in chronic absenteeism across the state. Especially, it's pretty significant since COVID. And also, I found that since 1819 to 21-22, students who were chronically absent rose from 16.8% to 28.4%. And as you can see, high school is pretty high. And that also, I found, is across the state as well, due to a variety of different reasons. But that's also not just significant with Winthrop grade school, it's a concern statewide.
Sorry. Is there any way to get a breakdown of whether these are excused or unexcused or suspensions?
I get a report, but what I do is I have, either Donna or Kristen will give me a report that I track weekly, and we can separate it, what's excused, what's unexcused. And we also tardies as well, because I think really watching the chronic tardiness is equally important, because they're also missing important instruction as well. So we do get that and filter that out.
And is that just for the grade school, or do you do that for the district?
I don't do it for the
You do it
district,
for
I
the
do it
school.
for the grade school, I monitor it for the grade school.
Do we have
That's
that?
by building monitoring.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of the responsibilities of chronic absenteeism and truancy fall essentially, I believe, on the principal initially.
Yep.
Before they escalate at the truancy level where it goes to the superintendent by referral from a principal. We are going to report on suspensions later, but it doesn't tie into chronic absent. It's part of the behavior data.
Okay.
One of the next ones.
Thank you.
Ivy has a question. She said the percentage rates are higher for 2022, and was curious if the COVID policy contributed to that percentage.
So I think for 21 and 22, those that are chronically absent, in the last 2 years, the state has treated it a little bit differently as well because of quarantining and having required absences as part of the safety piece. So I do think that probably is a contributing factor. However, our quarantining requirements varied a lot last year, right? Like 22, we ended up easing up a lot on that, and we had a lot fewer quarantines, and then this year even less. So I do think that could be a piece of this. We did specifically in Winthrop have a way to delineate quarantine absences so that it wasn't at least counting towards truancy, which is the unexcused piece. But just to kind of add to what Debbie said, since 22, we've seen that at the high school level, although it's across the state, it's a big issue here in Winthrop. We had the same quarantining policies in 2021 across all 3 buildings. Nothing's different about that. It was reported in Power School the exact same way. So it was reported to the state the same way for all 3 schools. So I think that as we're looking at this data and as we have some conversations, there's been a lot of administrative level conversations around getting kids into school and the importance of them attending, because they're not going to be making those gains, making progress if they're not in our buildings to do so. So I know at the middle school level, at the high school level, and 21 wasn't too bad at those two buildings, but it is an ongoing conversation at the 18 level on how to get the numbers in with specific building plans, because that's part of it as well.
I think it's also important to note that we really don't have any, like, teeth to the absence type thing either. Like, in some instances, we've actually had to call Winthrop PD to help us to do, the wellness checks. So it's really very challenging.
It's a statewide issue, and I know that we have been working, principals are feeling like, what do? We threaten, we send letters, we do these things, we tell parents we're going to do this. So our responsibility is to report to the Department of Health and Human Services if we have students that are chronically absent and things like that. But then there's really no follow-through. So the state, the Department of Education, is actually working with the Department of Health and Human Services to try to figure out how do we do that and how do we support. And we do due diligence, and we are so lucky here in Winthrop that if we have a student we haven't seen, we're not getting phone calls, we're not doing that. We can call the Winthrop Police Department, they can do a welfare check for us, and they have for all three of our schools.
Yeah.
But it's an issue statewide at this point. And I think COVID really did exacerbate that because students were staying home, and then those that had some mental health issues or they were frail, medically fragile and whatnot, it's easier to stay home than to almost risk to come to school, even though we have precautions put in place. So we have to change that mindset. School's safe, what are we doing? And these are precautions we have in place now. And that's what we're doing now, is educating when we're trying to work with these. What can we do? When our letters that we send home say, please come in, meet with us, meet with their school counselor, meet with the assistant principal, the principal, what can we do to help? And we have set up specific plans.
And these are students who have not withdrawn from homeschooling and have not
Correct.
Yeah.
dropped out specifically.
There's no.
They're just.
They're still enrolled, yeah.
Yeah.
They're
Do we
still
know
enrolled with us.
What percentage of these, specifically I'm thinking unexcused absences, are the same student over long periods of time versus, sporadically?
Like longitudinal data on specific students? That would be a by building question.
Yeah, I mean, I look at that, and I was just talking to Jolene about that, how next year I want to do an even better job at. Our truancy is actually not bad. I think we had 5 students by the end of the year that were truant. We've had meetings with all of them, and I can't stress enough that it's about support. And it's not out to get you. It's about support and what do you need. Because it is a case-by-case basis. And it's just so different. Each situation is so different. And we have found that some students needed to be put on a 504 plan. Some students needed guidance or outside counseling or check-in, check-out or a breakfast bunch. Sometimes it's not even anything school-related at home, and the parents just need to talk things out, or maybe the kid needs an alarm and we need more structures at home. I mean, it's endless. But bottom line, it is about that support piece that I think is critical. And the other piece that I wanted to piggyback on is meeting with some of these families and like looking at those trends and trying to just stay on top of it. I've only been in Winthrop for 2 years. They're the same kids on the list. A few of them did the same ones. The other ones are new students. So I don't know because they're new. But I can say that the other ones, it's like, okay, they've been here, so what can we do to really continue to support these families? And I think the other piece is, like Lori was saying, is if they are sick, not horrible, like if it is a sniffle, it's okay, school is safe. The pandemic has really made an impact on this because parents are concerned. Because there are elderly people still sick, they're still thinking COVID, right? What we had. So it is that education and knowing that bring them, and if we think we'll send them home. But let's give it a shot. So.
And are you finding the same at the middle and high schools, similar situations? Or are you, at high school, I'm suspecting you're probably finding it's just difficult to keep kids of a certain age who are just not interested.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we have the same scenarios at high school, but then you add to it, students can drive themselves to school, students, you know.
Or not.
Or not.
There's a degree of parent apathy there too. I mean, speaking from my own two, I've got a 17 and a 16-year-old, and like our involvement in their stuff is waning as they get older. It's just nature. And then, if my 17-year-olds want to do something, then, there's not a whole lot that his mother and I can, make him do it. He will, because he will, but, in a lot of situations at the high school, you've got that behavior that's become learned. You have parents who really struggle with their children, who work. They're single parents, they're not home in the mornings, they have to tend to brothers and sisters that are younger, they're not interested in school, and again, like Debbie talked about, sort of that COVID piece. I found that there was a lot of kids who, when we did, remote schooling or part-time school, that a lot of kids dove into the workforce. There wasn't a lot of eyes on businesses for students working and enforcing that. So that kind of shifted some of our attendance and some of those trends. And certainly, you have a dynamic. I think that probably more at the high school, because they're older, you do see a group of kids and you do see a pattern of a lot of the same kids. And I think, it was brought up too, that there's not a lot of teeth in the law. We can do a wellness check, we can send a letter home, I can go do a wellness check, we can make phone calls, we can offer X, Y. Even this year we had, folks meeting parents off of school grounds, so they felt, not so intimidated by coming into the building during the day. And sometimes it had an effect and sometimes it didn't. It was all about how can we help you and help your child be successful, get them across the finish line whenever it may be. So I can't really speak for the other two principals, but I know that behavior, certainly behavior incidents is the least favorite part of my job. is having to deal with, with incidents of behavior. Certainly I want to intervene and get kids back on a positive path, but it's not always fun. But keeping the school safe and making sure staff and students are safe is really important. So on this graph, from 2018 to 2022, we see behavior incidents that looks like have resulted in suspension, whether in school or out of school. Behavior-wise, suspension-wise, for me, again, suspension is the last line of defense. We want kids to be in school as much as possible, and if I can get a kid to be in school to serve their punishment for their behavior, or make it right, or do something restorative, to me that's more important. I see out-of-school suspensions, and you'll see on the next slide is really that I call the fabulous five. Okay, so any kind of drug, alcohol, weapon, assault, those kinds of behaviors, fighting, those are typically automatic out-of-school suspensions. Then you have a gap, and then you get into things like tobacco, vaping, bullying, harassment. Those tend to be case by case, offering other things in between to try to keep kids in school, like for nicotine or vaping, cessation, other things to get kids to try to stop. Not that we don't offer those or counseling for those things that are out of school suspension, like if there's a fight or there's violence or there's a weapon brought on school property, there are steps taken, but there's also a no tolerance for that kind of thing. certainly because staff and students need to be safe and need to feel safe and in school at all times. And even in Winthrop, I think all the principals probably, Lori and I more than the grade school, and maybe I'm speaking out of turn, but just because they're older, tends to be when you see things like, the drug use, the vaping stuff, even though it's probably at the grade school, things like, weapons being brought into school. Unfortunately, it does happen here, not a lot, but it does. So this graph is very colorful. Megan did a great job putting this together. So you can kind of see not only by year, but outlined by color, some of those fabulous 5 incidents that I described. Weapons possession, violence, with or without physical injury. And these are all data points that we have to report to the state. So when I suspend somebody out of school, it has to fit into one of these buckets, okay? Like if I suspend somebody for alcohol, there's a pretty clear bucket. I think the yellow one is probably the most nebulous bucket. It's sort of like the other. That could be where, your bullying, your harassment, your nicotine, vaping stuff kind of goes, those kind of things. But again, these are the big incidents, and these are what I would say most principals or most administrators, if they have to suspend kids from school, these are the reasons why.
And do we have a breakdown of what is in that other not related to drug use and violence for the district? Do we have not a de-identified list of what kind of activities are leading? I'm just a little bit concerned that has substantially increased.
Yeah.
And it's, on the face of it, looks like
Yeah.
we're just throwing people in there.
So I think what Jay's speaking to is that there's no place for vaping. So looking through a lot of, even probably this year's data, as far as where you're logging vaping of something that is not an illegal drug, right? Because there's more than just vaping, right? That's over. If it's not an illicit drug, then I believe that's where those were coming from.
Right.
This again is the data that is certified by the state and that is publicly available. We probably could do some additional digging. But I'm unsure. I would have to look into historical discipline logs for specific students, which again, if we had some more historical admin here, it would be easier for them to generally comment on that. But
It really is, I hate to say it, like the catch-all category. The state used to have more check boxes like tobacco, and they narrowed them down. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago. So for example, somebody being suspended from school for, being sent home for punching a hole in the wall. It doesn't fit weapons or violence, it's not necessarily a violent incident or violence with physical injury, it's not alcohol, it's not drugs, so it would go in that yellow bucket.
And then I know that you wouldn't have the historical data, you, Jay, but when you're putting that information in wherever it gets saved at the local district level, is it just the other box, or is it the other box and then this is what it is in the other box?
So we have the other box, this is what's reported to the state, and everything that I put into Power School, that Lexi puts into Power School, it defines what the incident was.
Okay.
So we have that local data. Now, I made it my mission to log everything religiously into Power School. There's not a lot of data before me from high school kids in Power School, but I believe it's really important that we have a lot. Maybe they logged it other ways, but I feel that Power School it's our SIS, right? It's our student information system. It's universal to everybody. We can see it, and it helps me see patterns of behavior. So that's why I put stuff in Power School. I always say, kiddo can go one path or another, And, you know, when you see that, like, you know, a kid that I nominated this year for, you know, really turning around, you know, the data in Power School, the incidents in Power School, the lack thereof, support that pattern of behavior, whether it be a pattern that's trending not good or a pattern that's trending improving, just like grades.
I'm significantly less interested in what the state DOE information is and significantly more interested in what does our district actually have. I don't care what they norm out. I want to know what's actually happening here on the ground. And I know that the other board members are more interested in that than they are in the state normed information. So if we could get that information, at least for the past year, understanding that going more historically would be significantly harder, based on, you know, who administrators were and how they may or may not have logged information. That would be helpful.
If I were a betting man, and I'm not, that a huge chunk of that yellow in 21 and 22 is David.
I would say it probably is, but I
Could
know
also be masking or refusal to mask,
Right.
because anytime a student is sent home, it's an external suspension. And anything that's a suspension is a behavior incident. So there's more things that are logged also in Power School that are not considered a behavior instance, that are just in a discipline log, but they don't reach this level of severity.
And I know that some of the board members are very sensitive to this specific data, these numbers and how they're looking. And so if we can see that, yes, it might have come out on the suspension thing, but that's not necessarily what happened, especially when we're talking about masking or not masking. Well, that doesn't raise to the level of you're suspended so much as it raises to the level of you're not being safe, go home today, come back tomorrow and do better. And so it would be good to be able to see the what there.
So, just clarification from the board level, would you like me to make sure I have that prepared for our December reinvent of this that's going to have our 22-23 data, or is that something that the board would be interested in seeing sooner?
Sooner, yeah.
For the 2022 year?
For the year that we just finished.
So 22-23.
22-23, yeah. If we could have that possibly before the end of the summer, so maybe for our last August meeting.
So I think the certifications, so everything at the school level has to be finalized by 7:30 for behavior data.
Okay.
So if we could put that into an August, we can plan, but I want, some of those reports take some time.
Yep.
And when we have to certify it, we make sure that everything we have in there is actually correct.
Yep.
So it is important to use data that we have validated and Jim validates it as well. Especially for sharing it publicly, and it's around something that is so important to the board, but so important to our community as well.
Yeah.
So I'd be happy to try to get some of that together. At that point, it wouldn't be public data. And moving forward, I would be happy to highlight the other piece for each year.
Thank
if we
you.
wanted to.
I'd appreciate that. You had a question, Alicia?
Yeah, I was just gonna suggest, I know this is the state, but for Winthrop, for our community, having a separate category for the vaping, just so you can see the numbers.
So we would have to manually tally that as the year goes on, which if that's something we can discuss with Jim, because that would be a change in protocol a little bit. So I'm uncomfortable saying that we will do that on an ongoing basis, because we do have things that have to be set up, so they do talk to Synergy, which talks to NEO, and then everything works, so. I'll make a note of that with providing an additional breakdown.
And the graphics speak, but when you look at the numbers, we were talking about
Less than 30.
less than 30 incidents in
Yeah.
3 schools.
Yeah.
And in my last school, I probably had 30 incidents in less than a week. So, perspective-wise, I mean, I think we're doing a pretty darn good job here. And that is a tribute to the community and to the staff and the teachers in each of the buildings.
Did Ivy have any questions?
She asked if we could confirm that it will be. I'm assuming that she was talking about the vaping category being separate.
Could you ask for clarification?
Yep.
Or actually, if you can, if she's able to speak, we can
Yeah.
unmute her and she can ask a specific question.
Okay.
Hi, Ivy. Go ahead,
Hi.
go ahead and ask your question.
Okay. Just the slideshows, because I noticed like that whole information isn't in the packet. So I had asked if that would be available to us, so I could get.
Yeah, that was something that we asked Megan for at the beginning, if we could get a copy of this presentation, and she said she would get it to us.
Wonderful. And you already asked a couple questions that I had too, so that worked perfect.
Thought I would be.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So this is actually information from our April certification. So I did try to put together something for you folks that showed this year. Again, you do see our in-school, out-of-school, and it is a large section of others, so I do hear your concerns for that. But I do want to let the board know there was an attempt made to try to show you the behavior data for this year, but again, we want to make sure we're showing public, valid data that's been through the certification process.
I think the concern that both of us have raised is that some of this information is in our packet, but a lot of it's not.
Yeah, well, and this is not directly related to the strategic plan. In your packet is just the strategic plan draft.
Right.
So happy to provide whatever, but
Thank
yeah.
Okay.
And so it looks like that this is my last slide, right?
Yeah, that's me.
And then this is, correct me if I'm wrong, those graphs, those last graphs kind of mushed together
Yep.
into seeing all the incidents and the types of incidents and the resolutions for those incidents.
So this is every year, 2018 to 2019?
This is this current school year,
Oh,
period.
this is this first really?
This is what was certified as of April 15th, 2023 for the 22-23 school year. So we don't have the last quarter. It's reported quarterly, kind of like Debbie said around chronic absenteeism. So right now our numbers in both buildings are up, and I think part of why, like if we were to add in school and out of school together, we're very high. We're almost at 50.
Right.
I think the reason why we're gonna see those numbers up is we have some experienced administrators from other districts who are logging things correctly in the computer system.
Okay.
And so that graph, when Jay's talking about what does that other stand for, these are things Jay has logged,
Yep.
or Lori has logged for this year, as of April 15th. So again, this is what our district numbers look like for this current year. Those were the ones again, it's quarterly, I felt comfortable being able to share.
It was just a little shocking because adding them up, that's way more than what we were seeing on the other graph, but I was like, wait a minute, wait.
Yeah, so I think, again, I want to reiterate it, when we look at this next year, we're going to see instances that are going to be 50, 60 instead of 20, 30, because we are trying to norm what is being put in the system.
Yep.
That's a goal. We talked about it at our last AT when we kind of decided, who was going to be explaining what pieces in this presentation, that needs to be consistent across all three buildings, and we have to have a clear standard procedure for doing that. So that regardless of these people being in there, that longitudinal data is going to be valid and it's going to be structured the same way.
Yeah. Great, thank you.
Thank you,
The other-
Mr. Before.
The other thing just to think about is that this is what we report, this is what the state, we have certain guidelines we have to report to the state. However, all of us document internally in our Power School and things, we have incident logs and we are writing, Jay is masterful at that, and Jolene, we have that. So if a student of mine is heading up to the high school, they have something that happens in September, they're gonna see, pattern of behavior, same with the attendance piece, all of that. So even though it may not fit one of these categories, any of those instances or an infraction to our code of conduct, which is different than this, is logged or noted. So we're really trying hard, the three schools now, to be as consistent and clear as we can be utilizing Power School. So it's a change, so you are gonna see it. Updates.
So those incidences do not affect the graph then?
Some of them do,
Okay.
but we're logging all behavior incidences.
Yes.
Okay.
It's
So
like the
some-
file for a student, not
Yeah.
everything in a student's file would have to go to the state, but it's important that our admin are consistent with what they put in that file, so that if there's some low-level things that have been happening historically, and then something happens at the high school level, we have a backlog of information to support.
So the state asked for certain behaviors. State asked for bullying, asked for chronic absenteeism, those kinds of things. They asked for weapons. They asked really dangerous behaviors. But we're tracking disrespect. We're tracking not following directions. Those kinds of things that are a disruption to learning.
Right.
So because we want all
Dress
three of
code.
our,
Dress code.
dress code, yeah, we want all three of our schools to be a safe environment for teaching and learning. That's our number one goal.
And I think the biggest thing, right, the best example is bullying. Bullying is defined as a pattern of certain behaviors to individuals or similar behaviors to certain individuals over a period of time. It's hard to prove when a kid is being bullied if things are not recorded, right? You can't see those in an electronic file draw over time or to the similar student or the same student over time. So that's one of the reasons, and maybe I'm just programmed like a robot, that's one of the reasons why I personally feel it's so important that if a student is in my office, even if it's a warning for swearing in class, it's logged.
So just if I can, I like the idea of that, because I think, a lot of parents and whatnot have addressed or have shared concerns about bullying in the community. So I think that's really important. I like that idea and streamlining the process. I'm wondering though, just to follow up, you mentioned that previous 18 members, I'm talking to more Megan, was her statement, you said weren't logging.
I don't think we had a conversation on the importance of consistency and what that looks like. So if you never set an expectation, then it's up to that person to determine what's most important to be in the computer. So by having some norming conversations and really making that a priority piece, then I can't say people weren't doing things, but I can say that it wasn't something that we had talked about making sure we norm.
But just following up, the stuff in here, what main is required, requiring you, that stuff is probably recorded. It's more of the.
Yes, it would be
Okay.
some of those lower level pieces
Okay,
leading
got
up.
it.
I don't think that, anything that results in a suspension needs to be logged in the computer. That is a requirement. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, good clarification.
So bullying is a hard one. And you'll see on this graph right here that in 2022, there was one instance of bullying at the high school and at the middle school. However, bullying that doesn't mean we're not looking at behaviors. We're not looking at those kids that are mean or harassment or things like that. So we have a clear procedure in the district, and I just put the policies up because we have a really clear defined procedure that the board reviewed last July. And what we have to do, bullying comes down to an imbalance of power. Is another student making another student feel uncomfortable, they can't learn, and why is that? But as we start to investigate that, we also have to see, where does it fall? Is it bullying or harassment? Because it's a whole other pathway of what we have to do. So when I meet with families or I meet with a student, one of the tools that I use, and it's on the board policy, and I left school without grabbing them all for you, but this flow chart, this is the best. I actually use a highlighter when I meet with families or I meet with kids, and I talk about what it is and what it is not. So Winthrop School Department has a really nice definitive plan for bullying. As of April 15th this year, we've already certified April 15th, we have not had one instance of bullying, which is fabulous. One of the nice things about bullying, but about our procedure is that we really try to do what's corrective action. So we have a nice toolbox of alternatives. What can we do to help both? Help the victim person that is being accused as a bully, of what can you do? What does that behavior look like? What can we do? Is it through conflict resolution? Is it through mediation? Is it through some counseling? So we have a lot of different supports that we can offer families, and we can offer the students, which is really nice to stop before it gets to this type of incident. We also have anyone can make a report, and that's what happens. Sometimes it may not get reported. So there's a form that gets filled out. It can even be done anonymously, but a parent can do it on behalf of their child, and the child can do it at my level, Jay's level. They can do it. At Jolene and Debbie, they're going to do it. A parent will come in and meet with them. But they fill it out, and then we are obligated as the building principal to go through and start investigating it, documenting it, and supporting it, and then sending it on to the superintendent's office. So we have a really nice, clear paper trail. I keep these with the kids in their working folders. So we know, so again, we can help.
And those working folders physically move from school to school as the kids grow up.
The one piece, I can't say this enough, this was my first year in Winthrop, and I just finished my 35th year in education, and the communication that we've had this year about transition is so good. It really, we've stepped it up a notch, and we're moving. I feel like I know these incoming sixth graders. I feel like I handed off, and having Lexi at the high school, I feel like I handed them off very well. That transition has worked nicely. So yes, all these things are being kept. We're working on that record keeping so we know our students.
One more thing to add too.
Yeah.
So online, and this was a conversation at the board level, I don't know if it was last year or previous to, is we had to make an online form for Title IX, which is harassment specifically. So we as an A team, through these conversations, through the strategic plan as well, have decided that we really need to add bullying to that type of form. So we're not exactly sure how it's going to be edited in a way that it can still meet the law for Title IX, but it also would help us get that historical information. If Johnny's being referred for bullying, as Jay said, we have to determine that it's a pattern.
Right.
And so it may take a report that's unsubstantiated, but if there's a couple unsubstantiated reports, then it's nice to, again, have that record, and having it digitally would be helpful too. So I do want to let you all know that we are recognizing that it, as just like Lori said, it could be underreported. We encourage families to reach out and say, I think this is happening, and any of our admin would be happy to share that form, meet with that family, but we do need that official log of, I believe that my child is being bullied, or I believe that I am being bullied. We do need a paper trail for that
And
as well.
when the report comes to us and it's based on race, color, one of our protected classes, race, color, and history, any of that, then we go to the other policy and we go to harassment.
I think part of the community frustration when we look at the bullying numbers is that people of a certain age, I'll call me in that demographic there, bullying is an umbrella term instead of a specific definition. And so when families hear that their child is being treated a certain way, it falls under that bullying umbrella, but maybe doesn't rise to the level to meet that definition of bullying. And so there's some frustration with, but why are these numbers so low? My kid by themselves could have tripled that kind of a situation.
But I would love, and that, there still might be bullying that's happening there, but we need a teacher, a student, a parent, we need someone to report it so that we can go through that flow chart and actually do the investigation. And part of that investigation is to process with the parents or with whoever referred. Like they need that again, is that education piece that Lori spoke about with chronic absenteeism. We would love to have families who are concerned make a referral, call the principal, say, I think this is happening and I'm very serious about it. Awesome, I'm gonna send you something, I need you to fill it out so we can get this process going.
And we do try to talk about that because you're right, that word gets thrown out a lot. And so even at school now, we're trying to talk and educate our students. What does it mean to be bullied or be a bully? Or what does it mean to other side, where's the harassment piece? What are all three of those things? And what can you do for us, like in our assemblies and whatnot, what do you do as a bystander? You can stand up, say stop, and then report it to an adult, so an adult can investigate and see and make sure and try to protect them.
I know that when Will was entering pre-K, so that was a few years ago, we had a parent meeting where all of the parents for that pre-K class came in together at the same time, and we got some information from the teacher, and we got some information from the principal, but I don't remember there being any organized night like that beyond his entrance into pre-K. Does that happen now, where parents can have a parent night at the beginning of the school year, where they can come in and have things like, this is what bullying is, this is how you as a parent can help your child if they are coming home with these complaints? Is that kind of stuff happening at this point for every grade level?
No, we have the open house, and that's really just
Come in
general,
and say hi.
coming in to say hello
And they do a step-up night at the high school where they invite all the upcoming freshmen and families in, but that's really around what does it mean to be a high schooler? Like, what are the graduation requirements? What does your schedule look like? Like, some of those pieces that are important, that are more educating around what does this transition look like for your high school kid, but not really around, do you know what it looks like? But
I think that's a conversation for us to
yeah.
talk about at our administrative
I
level.
don't
and see
know
what can we do.
that a full night might be needed so much as maybe even if, I hesitate to say a letter home because some families just don't have the capacity to read one more thing, you know. But some way to get that information to families about, I see you, about, hey, these are ways that you can make sure that your student is having the most successful year. And definitely more than just at the pre-K level, because, I mean, you've got kids moving in and moving out every year, and what I remember from pre-K versus now getting ready to go into 7th grade is drastically different too.
I will say that in my previous position, I did open house the night before school started, and at the middle school, open house will be the night before school started this year. And I'm doing a general session
Great.
and talk about some things. I haven't really thought about this type of information, but I think that's something that I will take into account and think about what can we do. Or even a parent forum later on in the year to help educate.
Because some parents might not know that they have that ability to say specifically either to the classroom teacher or to the administrator, this is what I'm seeing and it's happening all the time. And of course you have some parents who absolutely will do that, but some might not realize that they have that ability.
But they can have a voice.
Yeah.
I wonder too, like at open house, it hasn't been done like that in the past.
Right.
But this, just at the end of the school year, we were talking about open house and what would it look like, because we wanted it to look different.
Yeah.
And so we had started talking about to have more of a presence, a community presence for parents when they come, not just to go into the classroom and say hello, but like to have PTA set up and have like the Sunshine Committee set up. But that could be very, like if you have the guidance counselors,
Yeah.
you know, like have people there for, you know, certain things. And that could be like something at the guidance counselor table or, you know, not just me,
Right, right.
you know, saying, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I like
Is
it,
that,
yeah.
yeah. Because we talked to, I had just met at the end of the year with, because I meet with the union reps once a month, and we have new reps this year moving into the school year. So they were like, Jolene, can we sit down and meet? We have some ideas. And we had talked about that. And I think that really connects well to
Yeah.
the informational piece.
Oh, look at me.
Yeah, right?
Ivy has something to say?
Yes, can I have you?
Yes, thank you. Hi, Ivy.
Yeah, but similar to you, I had put in the notes that we're taking an awesome approach and procedures for the bullying and the documenting it. I had the same question about sending home a notice, because I know some parents are a bit uncertain on how to report or bring up the concerns. and thought just like a general, notice on that to families to just, so that we can take a little bit proactive approach, with those that are going through that, just don't have, or don't want to, or are uncomfortable or uncertain about reporting that.
Is there something on the district website so that, like are you or someone you know at Winthrop being bullied? Here, fill out this form.
We don't have an online form
I-
right now. We have our Title IX harassment one, which sometimes bullying comes through that form because, again, that's kind of like, there's a very specific definition for each. So there's not an online one. That's what I was saying. You're looking at editing that
Yeah.
Title IX one so that it really is going through one filter.
Yeah. I
That's-
know, I'm just thinking, there are some students even who might not feel comfortable verbalizing, this is the stuff that my friend or I am going through, or I'm seeing random students in my classroom going through, but if they have the ability to print, fill out a form and send it, whether it's, and my name's Joe, or, and you don't know me, either way, to be able to share that information, might be useful too.
I do know those children that, because I deal with a lot of foster children, I do know a lot of children who've been through traumatic experiences or have disabilities that have a hard time vocalizing or even understanding emotions, feelings, being bullied and stuff like that. So that's just another concern too, is especially those that have already been victimized by certain things have a hard time, speaking up that they're going through similar stuff or stuff like that because of trauma triggers and things.
Thank you.
So we have one last data point, and this was new, kind of a new process to Winthrop, which is doing a faculty feedback survey at the end of the year. So we are always encouraging our teachers to be reflective practitioners, and so the administrative team kind of decided we should practice what we preach a little bit, and invite some feedback from staff. So this was the first time that we sent out a district-wide survey to get some feedback from our teachers and ed techs, and some of these questions were very pointed to teachers and ed techs. I did get some feedback and some emails from folks who would like to be able to give information to other people. And so that's an area we'd like to grow in, like special education, curriculum, honestly. So collecting feedback is something that we also are gonna try to do more often from our faculty and staff. So I want to start with a couple strengths that were highlighted. So the first graph was the highest in the district. I do want to let you folks know that a portion of the majority of this survey was a Likert scale on a scale of 1 to 5. So teachers didn't have the option to do 3 neutral, which I was kind of thinking we'd have lots of 3s. And I'm very proud of our almost all of them over 4s. So as we're looking at these graphs, you see one a little higher, one a little lower. I want to make sure that you're always thinking about this as this being on a 1 to 5 scale. We had 63 out of, I think it was 87 folks who could have done it, do it. And that was over 70% in each of the buildings. So I did look at how much of each building did participate. It was sent out, they had a week to do it before they left. It was the last week of school, so there was a lot going on, so that participation is fantastic, in my opinion. So the highest district-wide score, so when we averaged all 3 schools and all participants, was this first question here: my administrator supports me when conflicts arise with parents. This was actually the highest score at the grade school, and it was the second highest at the middle school and high school. So across all 3 buildings, very high scores. So obviously our administrators are doing a great job supporting our teachers as conflicts may arise. The second highest as a district, which is actually tied with another question I'll tell you momentarily, was my administrator treats me like a professional. So I think that that's vital. We talk often, I know there's always conversations with teachers around getting the respect that your position deserves. So feeling that your administrator gives you that is a huge thing. That was the second highest as a district. It was tied with my administrator demonstrates a solid understanding of effective teaching practices as well. But I can only fit so many graphs till they're illegible. So obviously areas of growth as well. So if we're looking at just district scores, the lowest score on average, when I took all of them, was that my administrator visits my classroom often enough, and that was still a 3.3 out of 5. So it's still higher than a neutral score. And that was, let's see, that was the lowest at the grade school and high school, and the second lowest for the middle school. So obviously it's going to be low. That first graph there, I feel we have a positive school culture. I want to show that those scores are very high. But that was one of the, I think it was one of the second or third lowest ones, but I thought it was data that the board would be interested in. Again, as a district, it's going to average to like 3.9 out of 5, which is phenomenal. But it's still an area that we can look at a little bit more as being one of the lower scores. And then the last one is, in general, I believe our school is meeting the needs of our students. And I put this one on, we had a conversation at the 18 level as we were talking about the highs and lowest ones that we were going to share out this evening. And I decided this one, it's tied again for second lowest. But I thought this was a really important one as we were talking about our strategic plan tonight, that the middle school, that's a pretty big dip between the high school and the grade school as far as feeling that we're meeting the needs of our students. So if we think about programming available at the middle school, if we think about all of the COVID positions that have been added that are now ending at the middle school, I do want to point that out because I feel like that staff is telling us, even though again, it's higher than 3, that they're feeling like moving forward, we might not be meeting the needs of our kiddos. And I can't speak for that whole staff, but I know that's part of why Lori was very comfortable putting this out to you folks, to be very transparent, and make sure that you're aware that our teachers are feeling that too at the middle level.
How many total questions were on this survey?
So there were 4 comment ones, so there could be more pointed pieces specifically aimed at administrators, and that is theirs to sit through. Otherwise, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 15. It was meant to be reasonably quick.
Yep.
10 minutes.
So clearly there are some places where staff feel there's room for improvement versus some places where staff feels that we're right where we need to be and we're doing a great job already. Were there surprises at all for the administrators with any of the answers?
So I'm going to advocate for that. This is very personal, getting feedback on your profession. So, and we're a small district, so I would like to say everyone had surprises, good and bad. But that it's hard to get feedback on your practice.
Well, thinking about the concerns that were voiced earlier this year, were there surprises based on those concerns?
I mean, saying that our growth area is school culture, but all of those scores are above a 3, which is neutral on average. I feel like that says that our school culture, even though it's an area of growth, is still higher than the middle of the road, which is where our faculty could have felt.
And when the survey went out, was it strongly disagree, neither agree nor disagree, agree and strongly agree?
So there were only the 1 and the 5 were labeled, and the 1 was strongly disagree and the 5 was strongly agree.
Okay.
So it was implied.
Okay.
And then they can make comments.
Sure. For each question, they could
No,
make content.
for a separate section, which was almost the same thing. What are some strengths that my administrator has? What are some areas of growth that my administrator would have? And I don't remember. I think there was 4. I don't remember the other 2 offhand. But it was similar in specific to growth and strengths.
Okay. Great. Do you have any questions? Does Ivy have any questions? Does Ivy?
Oh, sorry, no.
So again, I mentioned earlier that and hearing the suggestions from the board, I'm happy to add some more specific pieces. Just to clarify, I got feedback around the 2021 4-year cohort, digging into that a little bit further, and looking at our behavior data and the other section, and seeing if we can delineate that more specifically and or pull out specifically vaping. And then I heard pieces about bullying, which I wrote a bunch of notes on as well. Was there anything else?
Yeah, I said this like last meeting, if we can, I know it's hard when it comes out, the report cards, if we have the data, put the scores on it. So I think,
Oh, on student report
yeah,
cards.
student report cards.
So yes, so we are working currently with a consultant, that we actually were introduced to by, from Jay, and he's been trying to build up our ability to use PowerSchool in a way to transfer information meaningfully. You'll see in our strategic plan, we're hoping to revamp all of our report cards in the next 2 years. We don't have testing data on PowerSchool,
Okay.
so having that printout on report cards would be a huge undertaking.
Okay.
But it's not, it's on our strategic plan, and it's our next steps.
Okay.
So hearing that from the board as well, I think that's going to lend nicely.
Okay.
And I know parents want that information. We do have a legal obligation to make sure we get that information out to families, and we're gonna come up with, again, another standard procedure for that going into this fall. Now that we have a real NEA again, we haven't had that for 2 years. What are those reports going to look like? And who's gonna be in charge of what to make sure we get them home?
Sounds good.
Thank you. So yeah, we'll look at doing a winter report once we get the new certified numbers, and I will try to break that other category down more, and for the longitudinal graduation, include something there. So all of this data kind of informs our strategic plan as well. And I do want to be thoughtful of the board's time and everyone's time tonight. I do have a presentation. I'm going to go very quickly through the process we've done. And then if we want to, we can do an activity for each of the 3 themes, or if you guys have done some pre-work on it, I'd be happy just to get some feedback on each of those pieces as well. So I'm going to run through this. If I'm too quick, please pause me or ask questions. Feel free to interrupt throughout. But I do want to, before we transition, just thank the A team for presenting, for being willing to share that data and dig deep into the definitions of those data, since we do have kind of a young board.
Yeah.
So it's good to know what that data is that we're looking at and how to support it as well. So thank you all for being here and doing that. All right, so our strategic plan, we started at this past, I know you'd like that. We started at our 18 retreat this past summer, so it's been a year in the making almost. Last August, I have some good notes here. We spent a day and a half, 2 days with Kelly, and we kind of dug into a couple different things that led us into a skeleton. So we started off by asking, what is our vision? What are our core values? How do we align things to our core values? And where are we now? So like last summer, where were we? Where did we feel like we were good? Now we kind of flesh out some of those things. From there, we sorted items out into different headings, and then we did the SWOT protocol. And that is looking at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats for each of those themes. So that was a 2-day process that really had us think about, where we are, what's important to us, and how can we move this district forward. From there, Jim and I met and we organized all those posters, there was like 20 of them, into kind of a bulletin list. And then in October, we held an A-team workshop. It was like a 3 or 4 hour evening meeting where the whole A-team got together. We prioritized that list. That was like a summary of everything we did, and identified 3 themes. And those are the themes I'm going to kind of present to you folks today. And then from there, we worked backwards. So what are the things that we hope that this will reach? What are the action steps we would have to do to get to that outcome? And then what is the goal, the overarching goal that all of these little outcomes are going to tie to? So we did that. At that meeting, or we started working on it, we determined next steps. We've had individual meetings with technology, individual meetings with Joel specifically around facilities. And then that led us to a spring workshop that we did, which was the same idea. We finished all 3 themes with outcomes and action steps, and that gave us our first draft. So there's been a lot of work over this last year to get us at one of our first drafts. Then this spring, we decided to bring in another stakeholder group. So we had all of our staff at a staff meeting in May. We wanted to really answer the questions, what's important to them? What the A-team came up with, does that really align with what our teachers are hoping for from the district as well? Is there anything we missed? Which is going to be a question I'm going to ask you folks this evening as well. Because the more heads you have, the more eyes you have looking at something, the better and more comprehensive it will be. So we went through kind of a fun workshop. I got to run it. I really enjoyed it. The staff was all very engaged. I am just so proud to work with such phenomenal professionals. So we determined whether what they gave us as feedback aligned to our current draft. I took all of their feedback and I gave each building administrator that specific feedback from their staff so that they can make some building-wide, we'll get information on their building, right? Feedback is always great. And then we were hoping anything that we need to, we could update and inform the strategic plan from. So everything became updated after that teacher brainstorm, right? Because it informs the whole plan. So I re-met with facilities and technology. I met with the A team met, and we reflected on that feedback. And we decided what is our timeline for all of these action steps. Who's going to be responsible for getting it done? And then what pieces of, what artifacts or evidences could we provide that we've met these goals? And that brings us to the draft that you folks have today in front of you. So some of the information, that's what this packet is. This wasn't for the data. This was really like, this is our strategic plan as it sits right now. And that's kind of where I'd love to start with you folks. So there is some data in there, all of which we've kind of discussed tonight. So hopefully as you're looking through our themes, we're at a point where we've maybe answered some questions, or if you're like, why is that? That why might be answered based on some of the data. So I'd like to start tonight by looking at our first goal. We'll look at all three of them, follow a similar protocol. And for the first goal, I want you to keep in mind our reading and math scores. And we're going to be talking about curriculum instruction and assessment first. So if you're looking at kind of the packet that I provided you folks with, on that page 6 is a summary of all of the outcomes for each goal. So again, I'm willing to be very flexible with the board on however they'd like to proceed. But what my initial thought is to do a think, pair, share, where I give you folks 3 to 5 minutes to look over just the blue section. So that would be pages 7, 8, and 9. And then there's only 3 of us in-house, so I don't think we would really pair up to discuss our thoughts with a partner. We could just discuss. But I think having 5 minutes to look either back at it because you've already looked at it, or take some time with it, it's pretty comprehensive once we get through stuff. So I'd love to provide you with some time to take a look at that initially. Okay. So I'll be quiet. I'll do 5 minutes or so.
Ivy, do you have this packet at home with you?
Or maybe she's just with 3 for each one.
So what I would do
Yes.
Thank you.
is I would take a look. So right now, if you wanted to look at this, this is just a summary. So going to pages 7, 8, and 9, all of those are the more detailed pieces of each of those. And as you're reading, I would like you to be thinking, not that one, what makes sense? What do you have questions about, right? And that could be things that you maybe have feedback on, and then what are we missing? So it'd be good to be like, yes, I agree with this. Those are nice things for us to hear as well.
So instead of turning to your partner and chatting for a couple minutes to prepare for a larger conversation, if you folks, we can just kind of hop right in. So I have kind of my master copy I'm happy to take notes on. The team is still here. We're happy to clarify, answer questions, have a conversation about anything that we have under that first theme.
I just want to start by saying that this is great. Significantly easier to read than the last strategic plan that we had, which has been out of date for quite a long time now. The thought that is clear that went into each of these things is impressive. So I commend you all on the work that you did. I think last summer when we started this undertaking, there was a collective breath holding going on. Oh no. But you've done a beautiful job of looking into the future and seeing where we want to be, where we need to be, and how we're going to get there. And I'm seeing some great delivery methods and not pie in the sky, but really things that are attainable. So I want to start there.
Perfect.
I do have a couple questions. In outcome number 1, it says an engaging curriculum aligned to state standards is implemented, documentation is developed, and is easily accessible to staff and community. And I'm wondering why is implemented is its own thought in that list.
So I think a strength of Winthrop right now is that we have phenomenal professionals who do this work. And I think that it is implemented, but I think the process of realigning state standards to what you're doing has impacted what people are teaching right now. I can tell you, we've done a lot of work at the middle school level. We've met 4 or 5 times each time this year as a content area, and people are changing what they're doing. And so we did add is implemented. It makes it feel like maybe we aren't doing that right now, and that's honestly a very honest conversation we had at our meetings. Like, we don't want to make it seem like we're not doing these things. But once we have done this alignment and said, wow, I really need to work on this, now you can start really making sure you're doing it and move forward into that documentation piece, so it's something that can, 1, be available to the community, which I think is important, also be available to new hires to be able to do some really vertical streamlining and making sure we're not overlapping pieces. But all of that really rich work that we're hoping to do in the future, we do need to go through kind of these basic processes. So the is implemented does feel kind of not true to where we are right now. But I feel like there has been a lot of conversations as we're doing those alignments that are, wow, I really need to make sure we're talking about probability a little bit more, because it doesn't happen that much. So yeah, that's a clarification for that. I'll note it, and it might be something that we discuss as a team and modify as well.
It makes a lot of sense the way that you explained it there, and I was thinking, well, why isn't that 2-word piece connected to a different portion? So that makes more sense. In outcome 2, when we're looking at clarify the multiple pathways to graduation that are available to all students, I'm seeing some check marks in the 2nd and 3rd year, but none in the 4th and the 5th year, and I'm just wondering the rationale, but what is the plan? Is the plan to just clarify them during those 2 years, or to have them fully visible and then they'll just carry through?
So I think, and Jay, you're welcome to chime in whenever you want, the multiple pathways to graduation, I think the idea is that we're really working on a way to communicate and have a clear structure and guiding documents. And not, by having an end date for that, we're saying this is going to exist.
Okay.
Not that it won't be regularly reviewed, and then we do have actually a lot in, maybe not this one, but under relationships, we did have a handful of items that we put on the 2nd year and the 5th year.
Yeah.
Because that meant we would revisit it, but we're also gonna be redoing the strategic plan in 5 years. So if we're feeling like after those 2 years, wow, we've done a really great job, maybe that doesn't need to be part of our strategic plan, but it just becomes part of our protocol of what our school counselor does at the high school level. Great question.
In outcome 3 regarding technology, one of the things that is listed is to hire a district-wide technology integrator. What's the difference between an integrator and the head of technology?
So, the tech director oversees all of the processes and all of the hardware, software, cloud-based, everything for the district. They oversee that. An integrator is really kind of like an educator of teachers on how to best use technology in their spaces.
Okay.
So a tech integrator might say, oh, there's this really cool thing, I'm gonna go make a presentation to all of the specific buildings. A tech integrator might sit with a teacher and say, hey, do you know how to use all of the technology in this building, new hires? It could be part of our onboarding. A tech integrator, having one that would work across the district would be a huge resource for our teachers to utilize technology in a meaningful way. And there's a lot of different ways you can use technology from it. There's a model called SAMR, where you're really just replacing one thing with another, which is very low level integration. It's really not even integration, it's just a replacement. But when you get to doing synthesis and pushing learning to a higher level of a taxonomy, and utilizing technology to make that opportunity available, that's what a tech integrator would do.
Okay.
It would help teachers design maybe assessments also as well, that are gonna be not just a PowerPoint, but like what are cool things out there. I also would love to be able to offer courses to students. That might be something we would ask this tech integrator to do as well.
So what I am hearing is that this integrator would allow for our educators to take the onus of that research off the front burner of their time and allow someone else to help them with that so that they're able to do more dynamic delivery.
So I think we do have teachers that their plates are very, very full. So looking up something totally new and different when you're really just trying to make sure that you're hitting all of the learning pieces is a challenge. We have teachers that do that though. So like I don't want to discount this position. This person would be a support to those teachers. So they found this really cool thing, but they can't get to work on their laptop. They might reach out to our tech people, but as far as using something as a teaching tool, that's not the responsibility of our tech department. They're there to help troubleshoot issues and maybe set up some stuff in the background. This person's intended to enhance and build our teaching practices, which is really, it would be really cool. And that, obviously, we pushed it out a little bit as far as something that we're not going to be really seeking board approval or budget work on for a few years, because we know that there are other things we're looking for as well.
And then, in outcome 5, regarding professional development, one of the things listed here is to increase the amount of professional development days. That seems like it would impact budget as well as calendar.
So we put that timeline specifically there as, aligned with the negotiation years. So next year is teacher negotiation. So the first steps towards that would start next year as determining whether or not that would be a possibility. It wouldn't be started until the following year. And then 2 years from there is when we do our ed tech contract as well. So looking at, our ed techs have to be ALICE trained. That's our, one of our safety protocols. That happens on PD days. We don't pay them for those PD days, and then we end up paying them anyways because they have to have that training to keep our building safe. So building that into their contract as well. So thinking about those pieces, that timeline is developed around contract negotiations.
I'm just wondering if
Oh, like an evidence?
yeah.
Yes, love it.
That was it for me. Do either of you have any feedback?
Yeah, my biggest thing is, made the comment when we found the information that we're low spend in school compared to our neighbors. And like our budget got passed pretty well.
I would say we have great community support. We're really thankful for that.
So, I think I'm an advocate that we need to spend. And I see like we need to add positions here for interventionists and whatnot. I think we need to do that. I definitely support it. I don't know if we need to do it sooner or not. My big thing is, I think every year we need to add. We need to keep adding staff where all the holes are, instead of doing it all at once. what we should add, but we should be adding adults everywhere.
So Timothy, what I'm gonna do is I think there's probably at least 3 or 4 positions that were mentioned in this. I'll look at the timeline for those, and make sure they're spaced out maybe a little bit. We tried to be intentional with that with our planning, but it's warrants another look. And I think that having the idea of a strategic plan is that we are continually growing, right? And that might be growing our staff, but doing it in a really fiscally responsible way.
Yep.
So that's great. I will double check the timeline for staff additions.
Okay.
Do you have anything else?
No, everything looked really good. I think it's all going in the right direction.
Alicia?
Well, yes, to choose our top 3, so I went with 1, 2, and 5. I really liked the number 5 specifically, making sure that the professional development is available and that it's engaging. Just because I know through my own children's experience that when their teachers are good, they love school and they thrive and learn a lot. And so that was excellent.
And something that's important just to highlight in this too, we have great teachers here already that can learn from each other. So I don't want to diminish, like I think we do bring in outside PD, we bring in things that are important. You'll see in relationships, we talk a little bit about social emotional learning and how to really start incorporating some of those pieces in a meaningful way. But we also have teachers that do great things. And even this year at the high school, they did run a couple PD sessions where teachers could pick one of 5 options and it was run by someone who worked in that building. And I like the idea of it being someone who worked in that building. It could be an administrator, it could be a teacher. I think we have things we could learn, having, Mr. Wheeler join us in transportation. He's a wealth of knowledge around safety and other pieces as well that we could really utilize him and all the people at all the different levels to provide that. So not just providing that, but looking at how we can promote leadership from within and share those great things that are happening. People are shy, they don't want it. So that's a culture shift. And thank you for that feedback.
Ivy, do you have anything to, I'm looking, excuse me, sir. Ivy, do you have anything to add?
No, but 2 and 5 were really good, and that's where my interest with all this is. Well, more of my interest.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Tiff, could you turn on these lights?
A little bit, aren't we?
My eyes are struggling.
I was struggling a little bit.
You folks are doing really good being very attentive and providing great feedback. There's been a lot of information tonight, so thank you. That's all. This is very helpful. We
Thank
want
you.
something that matters to us, to our teachers, to you, and then our next step will be our community as well. So I know this is a long evening for you, but it's really important to us. So our next one is going to be communication relationships, and I just want to remind you of our enrollment data, right? Because I think that some of the stuff we're going to talk about might tie a little bit into our enrollment. I do think that as we're thinking of relationships and communication, our graduation rate, our chronically absent percentages, all of these are data points that we took into consideration as we were thinking about and looking at this second theme right here. So we'll do 5 minutes again.
Yep, sounds good.
And feel free, this one is long as well, so it's 10, 11, and 12.
Thank you.
seconds left, sorry, I wasn't good about the 1 minute warning. Alrighty. So happy to start right off. It kind of worked well going that same way. If we want to follow that same process again, so hit it with your best shot, Kelly.
I only have 2 comments on this. The first is regarding outcome 4, that the schools are promoted as welcoming community centers. Specific to, well, I guess all of them, but communicating availability of spaces for community events kind of brought it to mind. Right now, when groups want to use the schools, any of the buildings, they have to carry their own insurance for that, which is difficult for some smaller groups. So is there potentially a way through our insurance that that group could purchase a rider or something to cover that period of time instead of having to self-insure? I know that when I was the Cub Master, we thought we would have meetings here, but we couldn't because of the insurance. So we ended up actually having to go out of town to be able to have our meetings, which was inconvenient for everybody. Yeah.
Kind of a bummer.
It is a big bummer. And then on outcome 5, develop structures for regular celebration and recognition of staff. Has there already been a discussion about what celebration and recognition looks like? Because my first thought is pizza parties, what a bummer. So, has there been some thought about how you'll get feedback from staff about what recognition and celebration would mean to them, what would be meaningful and useful?
So this is actually, and I'm sure that I know there's already been some things that, when you start working on a strategic plan, just like full disclosure, it's really hard to not just start stuff then. So like full disclosure, there already has been conversations around this one.
That's excellent.
And what's also excellent is that, and you bringing this up, is that staff recognized this in their brainstorming session as something they wanted as well. So it was really cool when we met to do this final draft to bring to you, that we had 3 different colors. Every time a staff said something, I colored it. So there were 3 different colors on this one, or at least 2 different colors, I think, on this one, for something that staff wanted, and we wanted it as well. So it was nice to be able to say that aligned with what we wanted. There are some recognition structures that already exist. I know at the high school, I don't know, Lexi, you want to talk about Baby Yoda?
Yeah, sure. This year we started, every staff meeting starts off with the staff member who previously received the Baby Yoda statue. It's called the Yippee Yoda, recognizing another staff member for whatever they've done to be outstanding, whether it was the whole year or this past month. And Yippee Yoda made its way around this year. Oddly enough, I received it at the last staff meeting because the person who got it didn't know that I was the one who implemented it. So it's kind of nice though, because now I know where he is, so I'll know that we can start him again at the beginning of the year. And Jay and I did really every staff meeting, we had some sort of, the last 5 minutes, some sort of really quick activity. Some of them were total mayhem, like we had a rock, paper, scissors, full staff competition, and the winners got, you know, prizes, and then like the biggest cheerleader got prizes. So I mean, we've tried to implement this year at every staff meeting. For the last 5 minutes, we did something fun. And I will say that Jay did a really good job of sticking to that, because sometimes
It's
I
hard.
would have to remind him that we needed the last 5 minutes to do something.
And Jolene, you have a new committee at the grade school that just started as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about that committee?
Yeah, sure. It's called the Sunshine Committee. And it used to be in the past that it was just more about sending out something in sorrow, really. It was like for more of like, we're thinking of you and so sad that, you know, that this happened. So this year, the Sunshine Committee took a whole different look. And once a month, we have celebrations where we go to like Ted's Trackside, or we go to the Cabin Masters. We've been bowling.
So do like that then.
And they, like we've brought in food for all the staff meetings. You just sign up and everybody brings in. So and actually the very last piece they did was so sweet. It was the last week of school, the week before we got out. They had the committee did put together a cart last week. I think it was the last week of school, wasn't it? They put together a cart that had all kinds of illegal goodies on them to be in our school anyway, like chips and
Wellness committee.
and yeah, wellness committee illegal. Wellness committee illegal, I should clarify. We're the grade school, we're not gonna have anything horrible. But it was super sweet because the kids actually took and went around the entire school and stopped for every adult in our building for them to choose, 2 or 3 things that they wanted off from the cart. So a lot of fun types of just celebrations for no reason.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I think trying to do some of those things is, like, and just making it part of, like, we're going to intentionally, it was weird because, like, don't you want that to be ongoing, but, like, we put that as only being next year because next year we're gonna focus on developing a structure to do this. So like that structure was maybe developed a little early at the grade school because now they have an ongoing committee that is doing that's the nice pivot, right? It's staff-centered celebrations. I also think kind of tying into the PD of the previous one, if we want to highlight people doing really good at their job, we tell them, you do this so well, I want you to teach someone else. And there's nothing more powerful than being told that you do something so well that you could teach someone that. And it's weird because you're a teacher, right? But like, it's about your professional practice. So I think just promoting that as well is going to be an intrinsic piece as far as rewarding or celebrating those who are really good at their teaching practice as well.
I don't really have much. This was, it's pretty well done. The only thing I had was on number 8, that transition from participation from middle school to high school. If you think about adding grade school to middle school.
So we have done maintain, okay, so that is specific to extracurricular and co-curriculars. And if Joel had been here, he would tell you that he's been collecting data on this, and there is a drop-off when kids participation in sports when they go from the middle school to the high school. We don't see a drop-off of involvement from the grade school to middle school.
Okay.
But I think that that's something we could look at, how do we promote those things, but our participation at the middle school is phenomenal in co-curriculars and in sports. And so there could be reasons why that happens, but actually making it a thing that we're gonna look at it and not just think, oh, well, maybe they're 3-season sports people, so now they wanna specialize in baseball, and instead of doing a winter sport, we have that down because they're doing indoor baseball clinics. That's a possibility, but let's gather the data to see if that's what really is contributing to our lower numbers.
Yeah, that's fine.
And kind of look at that too. So that's kind of where that came from, I think.
I chose 2, 4, and 5, but I really liked 2, and utilizing peer helpers in the 4th category down. I've seen a bit of that at grade school with my kiddos when they do their reading buddies, and how great it is to give them that responsibility and that kind of citizenship. And then I really liked, of course, Lori has, when she was first hired, she talked a lot about, maybe it was her, growth mindset and continuous improvement mindset, and I really liked that a lot.
And that's a huge piece of Jim as well.
Okay, yep.
I feel like that is, Jim's continuous improvement piece is
Yeah.
vital to who he is and his professional philosophy as well. So I did, I'm glad that's in there as well. Thank you.
Ivy? Feels weird looking at this. Gentleman over here?
Corey? Ivy?
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 What you got?
Yep, number 6 is creating standard procedures for students' data use and corresponding communications to families. I think that's something that's really important to strengthen. especially with the challenges from COVID. And another one is the develop collaborative structures that support, sorry, my kids are coming in from outside. Develop collaborative structures that support special education scheduling needs within regular instructional times. That's definitely, I think, with a lot of the kids that have, I guess the CDS reports that kids are having more learning challenges. I think that that's a really great target area to strengthen.
Yeah, and I think that when we kind of decided what roles were going to be in charge of these, that was a really challenging thing to do, because everyone kind of wants their fingers in everything, right? But when it boils down to it, that's a lot of our building principals, developing a structure so that when they're looking at their schedules, something in their head goes, hey, I need to consider this other demographic group, which is growing in Winthrop a little bit, right? Like, it's still below state average, but we're seeing an increase in special ed students. So thinking about one of our most basic structures, which is our schedule, which is different in every building, is that meeting the needs of those folks. And I know, Jolene, you had shared that you and Sue have already kind of started collaborating on that as well. So again, kind of making that a priority, but really looking at that's a 3-year plan, because we don't want to just come up with it next year. We need to come up with it, try it, reevaluate it, and then hopefully by that 3rd year, we'll have something across all the buildings that's going to be really thoughtfully inclusive of that population of our kiddos. So, thank you, Ivy.
I did have one question specific to the peer helpers portion, thinking specifically Jay, and a little bit on Lori as well, but more at the high school level. This is going back a lot of years, but when I was in high school, we had a peer helpers group that did a lot of things specific to how can we help to, as students, how can we help to reduce some of those activities that are leading to the other category of suspensions? How can we be positive influences on our students? Is that something that's already happening at the school, or that you're thinking about implementing?
We've planted some seeds.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it would be great if eventually, I know that it's something that I've talked with Jim about, if we could invest in our time and energy, either having a Key Club or a Rotaract. I'm sure Jim would be more interested in Rotaract, because that's a Rotary-based group, but having a group like that where there's a group of students who are doing exactly what you're talking about.
If you're interested in speaking to another educator in a different district who is actively or has actively worked in that, Ben Carney at Oak Hill,
Okay.
Was very active in our peer educator, our peer helper program, and he's still there now, so he may be able to give you some feedback on how they structured that program.
Great.
And figuring out, I didn't tell Ben I was going to scream his name across the nation. So.
But I want to be thoughtful and not just like keep talking and adding stuff. But there's just so much great stuff that you folks don't have the opportunity to hear about. So one thing that the Wellness Committee brought to the 18 this year was we partnered with Capital Area Healthy Communities, and they came in and did a vaping presentation for each of our staffs. But they also worked closely with one of our high school students who ended up graduating. Was it Maximum? And I think she did a presentation to the student body at the high school around vaping. So like, although that's not necessarily what you're talking about here, it kind of is.
Well, it
and the
really
plan is to, we have a new contact now at the Healthy Capital Area, and they have some additional offers. She's actually a former student. Like, I taught her, so it was really cool to be like, oh, interesting, so happy to see you. But anyways, we're looking at expanding that next year and possibly utilizing some high school kids to send the message to the middle school. So we do have some plans in place. It's not really a club that's going to promote whatever like that, but Jay also does have a student leadership club. Not club, it is a student leadership team that meets pretty regularly as well.
I think it's easy as a community to discount how much power comes from student to student, and the students can be saying the exact same words that the educators are saying, but the other student will consume it so much better if it's coming from a peer than from an administrator or an educator.
Or a parent.
Or a parent, for sure.
So, like that, it has a bigger outreach than just got theme two? Look at that, 2/3 of the way. So our last theme is going to be capital improvement, so I'm gonna, although I was really glad that Mr. West brought this up when it came to staffing, I'm gonna point out our per pupil spending also does include facilities. So when we're thinking about per pupil spending, it's not just positions, supplies, it is also the investment that we make in our buildings. So I do wanna kind of bring that up, and that number being a little lower as we go into our next conversation around what our facilities look like. So I'm gonna give you folks that 5 minutes again.
seconds left. Every time I got progressively worse managing the clock. Alrighty. Let us dig into our last one on capital improvements.
Okay. There are a couple places where the evidences seem to be missing budget development documentation.
So this, the majority of this was done with 2 sets of eyes. So
Okay.
having additional sets of eyes would be great. Do you want to walk through, and I'll just put a capital B?
So, outcome 3, update and or install camera systems across all buildings and provide necessary training to staff.
Put a B.
Okay. Outcome 4, install and maintain technology that supports maintenance systems and school security. I would go back to 3 as well. Well, actually, the development is in there. Those were the 2 places that I saw kind of glaringly that would need
I'll
budget.
put an overall note to myself to look at budget development for each of those.
And then questions, kind of just for clarification. When we're looking at outcome 3, explore technology that detects and deters the use of illegal substances, including vaping, and that can identify visitors who may be potential threats. That second part, and I can identify, can you elaborate on what that would look like?
So, Jay, were you part of that conversation with Joel? So this is something that I know we're looking at how to, at one point there was conversations around making the high school a shelter, because as far as some safety procedures, that would be a direction that would make a lot of sense for us to move in, and I think Joel ended up not being able to do that, but thinking about how we can make sure our buildings are secure during the day.
Is this like facial recognition?
I think is it a scan license?
So there's like a system like IdentiKit that is, when visitors come in, you can scan their ID, and it does a quick search on them, and it inevitably prints out a visitor's pass with a photo.
Okay, great. And then we discussed this in goal 1, but when we're looking at outcome 5, promote positive community usage, that goes back to that insurance piece, and how can we make that more accessible to people?
And I wonder if that actually becomes explore insurance options for folks. That can become its own action step.
Yeah, and that might need to have some budget development related to it as well, I'm not sure. It could end up being just that the group has to purchase a little bit, but that might also increase the insurance premium, I don't
Yeah.
know.
Let's see what that would be.
And there's one thing that I am not seeing as part of these outcome goals that I know we've talked about in the past, and this may just not be a place for it, but I have some concern with the egress from the middle and high school campus, that there's only one way in and out. And that if there was some kind of an emergency situation and there were an accident on the road, how do we get kids and staff off that campus quickly, safely, and effectively? And I know that there is a road there that
Yeah,
is,
Charles Street.
but from my understanding, no one on the school staff has a key to that gate. And if there is an accident, potentially on both of them, depending upon what the situation is, how do we get people out? So I think that that's something that we may think about including this.
So I'm gonna bring that idea to Joel and see
Yeah.
what he says. That might be something that we end up adding to, I don't remember if it's in this part or not, the comprehensive safety plan, which has not been,
Fully developed yet.
well, and like the initial paperwork hasn't come to the board in many years. But I
reach out to him.
Okay.
He asked if he needed to be here this evening, I said I would get all the feedback, and if there were any questions, I'd bring it to him as well, so.
Sounds good. Okay.
Yeah, just, I don't know, a couple of comments maybe. I mean, the last few years, I think the board that we've really, I think, pushed is we need to spend, our buildings are important, we need to replace and repair. So I think the list here is good, so for budget purposes, we can think next year, year after, whatever we can do to get these things replaced. And I think Joel has said it many times, and I agree. I mean, we shouldn't be thinking, do we have money for paint the trim out front here this year he's doing, that doesn't make any sense. So that this is very important that we know this is what has to get done, we're gonna put it in the budget every year and check it off.
So with you saying that, outcome 1, action step 2, develop short and long-term maintenance needs, I'm adding a B to that for budget,
Thank you.
Yeah.
because that would have to be part of that piece as well, so thank you.
Anything else from you?
No, again, I mean, it's pretty well done, I mean, it's all really well done, written.
Alicia?
On the first one, utilize the CHA architectural study, is that the binder, just clarifying?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, any need for updating that once we have worked through that book? 'Cause
So-
we've addressed a number of things, and I see that we have a lot of things in progress.
Yeah, so that's a great thing to bring up, and this one is one of the goals that, if you look at the timeline, we have next year as being like, let's really sit with that architectural study and see how we can incorporate that kind of into that next step, right, developing our maintenance needs or, architectural needs, but also a couple of years from now, whether we decide to get another one done, but based on whatever we can do with that first one, 26, 27, we are gonna spend some time making sure we revisit that, look at where our progress is, or whatever we need to, so. The hope is that we're not a one and done next year with that we've already determined 26, 27, we're gonna figure out what the next step for our district looks like.
With that said, there's a potential budget impact because that architectural study costs quite a lot of money.
Yes,
So if you could notate that as well.
add a little B there.
Yeah.
A lot of these are gonna have budget too, so I did make a note, it said budget development, double check on all of them.
Yeah.
So.
Some of them are really just review, which, or develop, which in general wouldn't have
Yeah.
any significant impact on the budget. But if we ended up, going through that entire architectural study and taking care of what needs to be taken care of, and then having somebody come in and take another look, that would be another
Yeah.
multi-$1,000 process.
Yeah, very expensive to think about if we were to redo that, for sure.
Anything from Ivy?
Yep, I have a couple questions. So the ADA regulation compliance, will anything be built or done about a lot of the grants that are out there? And somebody who's available to do grant writing to access some of those? And then to kind of piggyback off what Kelly said, as you're driving the bus and going down the main road into the school, there's been a lot of students that walk during times when cars are coming up and down, and then you got the buses, which are tight curves. And my concern is the safety of the students walking up and down that hill. Is there like anything to be built in for like sidewalks or widening the road? It seems as kind of a safety egress concern.
Yeah, so are we talking about Rambler Road going to the high school from the main road? So I think that is not supposed to be a walking road
It's not.
at all. It's not open to foot
Supposed to be
traffic.
cars.
It might not, should be, but it is.
But kids are utilizing it,
Yes.
so there needs to be something that, whether it's there needs to be something about that. So I put students walking up the hill, safety.
Just to add to that, when I had my high schooler walking, she said that a lot of times in the wintertime, the Charles Road was really icy too. Because I know that if you can't use Rambler Road, but she would walk up
That
other
back
road,
one.
and it was really icy.
Well, can you plow if that gate's closed?
Yeah, you can only plow so close, yeah.
I know, again, to just highlight how awesome our staff is, we have great maintenance folks that clean those sidewalks, that do a great job, and if they don't have a sidewalk available, then that is limiting,
Yeah.
for sure. So I added that in.
Ivy, I did put under the ADA stuff, I put grant writing with a question mark. I know, we did say explore additional funding options to expand and maintain field and indoor and outdoor playing surfaces. Under outcome 5, I wonder if I add an additional outcome that's more vague, like explore alternative funding sources, because honestly, there's some of the safety stuff. There also is potentially grant work out there. Joel has, although it's one more thing added to his plate, he has gone into trying to write some grants that will support our buildings as well. So although he's not hired to do the grant writing for us, we know that that's going to be valuable moving forward. So thank you for pointing that out. I'll either add an extra action step or try to make something more vague.
And that might be a great project for the older students, AP classes, and kind of utilizing our students with their writing abilities and teach them. This is a great asset for people to have with grant writing.
Yeah, it's intimidating when you haven't done it.
Technical writing,
Yeah.
I'm wondering if that's something that's it's covered in an AP class.
Yeah.
Or maybe
Well,
that
it
could
could
be
probably-
like an independent study kind of a situation. I know that lots of companies hire a grant writer. I don't know that we have the need for a full-time grant writer here at the district, but it might be worth in exploring what, hiring a grant writer on an as-needed basis would look like.
So I put that down. We do have at least 5 people in district who have written grants and have them approved.
Great.
Some are teaching staff as well. We have some we need to touch base with Mr. Dufour around a teacher who's interested in writing a grant right now too. So that might be for some of those more challenging ones, like when we were doing the energy audit, it made sense. So depending on what the the hoops are, I guess I could say, for those grants, it might be worth looking into that. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Ivy.
Awesome sauce. So you folks are done. So next steps, what I'm going to do is I'm going to meet with Joel to go over a couple specific questions to him and get some answers around how we want to proceed with that. I'm going to meet with Jim and we'll talk about how tonight went as well. I would love to, now we are kind of expanding, right, our stakeholders. So we have our admin, we have our staff, we have our board. I would love to do a community forum, which is pretty much mirror of what we kind of did tonight. Yep. Except there would be the actual pair up top at your table. Now let's share out some stuff. The idea would be that we would maybe try to do that prior to our 18 retreat, so that at our 18 retreat in August, we're able to come up with a draft that we can then potentially present to you folks as a final piece. I don't know if that will work as far as being able to get enough community involvement outside of being kind of the school year.
Well, with that said, I would make a pretty unpopular suggestion that it happen on a Saturday.
So that people could be available in the evening?
Yep, instead of in a weekday evening where people are coming home making dinner, tired from work, whatever the situation might be. We may get more
Participation.
That's
That's the dilemma, is it's hard to run a workshop and then only have 5 or 6 people. So my thought for that would be, Jim is part of the Rotary, there's a handful of people he knows. We have building admin who have relationships with families, Sue Fawcett who has it. Like, it'd be great to send some pointed invites, and you folks as the board obviously promoting that activity. Then people know what we want to do in our schools. That, like, this is a real great document that just says who we are as well, what's important to us, not just what we want to do.
I think it would also be beneficial to put that information on the district website, to give it to the community advertiser, to put it on the Winthrop Community Happenings Facebook page, put it on each of the schools' Facebook pages.
Can we schedule it for a rainy Saturday?
Please.
That would be
Pick
my
any
preference.
Saturday at
I was
this
just
point.
gonna say, anyone, as long as it's cold and rainy, people will be there, but if it's sunny, they'll be like, oh, it's the first time ever.
Right.
Yeah, I'll bring that feedback to Jim as well.
Could be
And
any Saturday.
if this, I'd love feedback on this activity as well, because for me, I would recreate this. For that, if that doesn't seem sensible for a larger group, then I'd be open to any ideas as well.
Yeah.
For from the board as you are also community members, so. That's all I have for you.
I just want to really quickly again, just say from bare bones pieces of paper on the wall to what we're seeing here, you've done an amazing job. You've really taken this and run with it and built a beautiful platform.
We had a couple really late evenings as a team, where we dug in we've done several long sessions, and it's hard because you hit a saturation point where you need to like get up and move, and walk away, but everyone has been collaborative, which is hard too. It's hard to come up with such a large team, large plan that involves everybody. And everyone feels included and seen in it as well, so we have a good team. We're really fortunate.
Excellent. So without any objection, I will declare this meeting adjourned at 8:28.